Good evening and welcome to the January 7, 2025 City Council regular hybrid meeting. I'm Mayor Salim Neese, and this evening's hybrid City Council meeting is being brought to you in person and by Zoom. We're also broadcasting live on MITV Channel 21 and on the city's YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us tonight. Council members, please have your microphones turned on for roll call. City Clerk Andrea Larson, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Andral. Here. Councilmember Jacobson.
Here.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Weicker.
Here.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Here.
And Mayor Neese.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I'll note that we have a quorum present, and City Clerk, please note that Councilmember Reynolds and Andrew have joined us remotely. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If you've joined us in chambers, please stand. If you're on video, please turn off your video and mute your microphone. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we now move to approval of tonight's agenda. If there's no questions, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum, seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral.
Aye.
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, motion passes. The agenda is approved. And next up, we have a study session number 1, which is AB 6595 YFS Community Needs Assessment and 2023 Washington Healthy Youth Survey. And we welcome YFS Administrator Derek Franklin. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Derek Franklin, Administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Services. I'm here tonight with YFS Prevention Coordinator, Michelle Ritter, and we'll be presenting on Agenda Bill 6595, YFS Community Needs Assessment and 2023 Washington Healthy Youth Survey. The purpose of the Agenda Bill is to provide the City Council with results from the 2024 Community Needs Assessment and the 2023 Washington Healthy Youth Survey. The 2024 Community Needs Assessment and the Youth Survey highlight, excuse me, the behavioral health metrics and demographics in the post-pandemic recovery period specific to the Mercer Island community. We will present tonight information on community demographics, youth mental health and well-being, drugs and alcohol, parenting, community and connection, seniors and older adults, and basic needs. Considerations and opportunities will be discussed based on the data related to YFS programming for youth, parents, seniors, and community well-being. On the slide before you, we have first a brief overview of the sort of treatment perspective YFS takes in the community and how our services are laid out. We call this a continuum of care model, with our services going from left to right across the wheel. On the left, sort of most upriver in the community are our health promotion and prevention efforts. Those include the Healthy Youth Initiative that prevents drug and alcohol use among kids and young adults, and the recently awarded Best Starts for Kids grant we have from King County to expand parent and child connection. Both of those work on the community level. Next, and where most of our services and staff are located, is our treatment and intervention programs. Those are often what people think about when they think of YFS. Those are school counselors, our outpatient mental health providers, and our case managers. And then to the right and to the end of the spectrum are squarely where our case managers work, and that's where our emergency assistance and senior services is. That includes food security, rent assistance, utility assistance, and other supports for basic needs. So again, YFS, because we work for all the entirety of the Mercer Island, we see folks across all ages and all demographics. Next slide, please. So one of the things, as I mentioned, that we are looking to do with this needs assessment is to take a look, a concerted look at what the behavioral health needs are in the community as a result of the pandemic. We adjusted during the pandemic in several ways. Prior to the pandemic, our services in mental health were, for example, done in paper and pencil. We had ink chart notes. It's a fairly secure way of doing business, and for various reasons, we did not need to switch to electronic medical records. When the pandemic hit, we did, and switched immediately over to electronic medical records. We changed our food security efforts from the old food pantry, which was run out of the Luther Burbank building, where we gave shelf-stable food items to folks. It was a large program run by volunteers and donations of food. We switched to food cards because of the pandemic. We couldn't transfer handheld food items. Other adjustments included increasing support for folks that had added stress for rent to maintain housing and other basic needs. And then as the pandemic began to wind down, some of these changes have gone back to whatever the new normal is, and that's part of what we're trying to figure out, where our therapy is in person, our counselors are back in the schools as schools are back in session. Our emergency assistance programs have gone away from food cards and gone back now. We have mobile food market coming onto the island, serving the folks that are food insecure with fresh and shelf-stable food items. And so what we were trying to do with the community needs assessment and taking a deeper dive into the Healthy Youth Survey data is just to see where we are. Are we still doing what the community needs in terms of behavioral health? So the presentation tonight will give you the results of some of that assessment and our take on some of the data, with an opportunity for council to give some feedback. Next slide. So the needs assessment, we consulted with a group called Burke Consultants, who do municipal needs assessments for other cities regionally. The needs assessment was part of our approved 23-24 work plan. We had two previous assessments done with the Burke Consultants, one in 2015 and one in 2019. The current relief, or the current needs assessment, was supported financially by some pandemic relief funds. This time around, however, we included, as opposed to previous needs assessments, local focus groups. We brought together groups of seniors, kids, parents, providers, folks from marginalized communities, and had in-person talks to get at qualitative as well as quantitative data. Next slide. The Healthy Youth Survey, we decided to add this to the presentation tonight because of the depth of the data available in the survey. The Healthy Youth Survey is provided by the state every 2 years in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12. It has extensive behavioral health and drug alcohol measurements. Thank you, Council Member. And it's a student self-report survey. Self-report survey in this case, oftentimes there's questions about whether or not those are valid, and yes, it includes internal validity and reliability measures in the survey. Next slide. So some of the key findings, we're going to, next slide please, Allie. We're going to, oh, I'm sorry, I jumped one ahead of you, thank you. We're going to discuss the findings from the needs assessment in these 7 categories. First, take a quick look at community demographics that have changed in the past several years. Look at youth mental health and well-being. What are we seeing from our kids post-pandemic? There are some differences. Look at drug and alcohol use among youth and young adults. What's gotten better, what's not, and maybe what might be going on there. Look at parenting and some of the stressors. Look at community and connections. Look at issues for seniors and older adults, and then, as I was just mentioning, looking at basic needs in the community. Next slide. So first, community demographics, and we'll organize this by first giving you just some large takeaways, and then a few slides that drill down on some details. So some of the takeaways from the needs assessment regarding demographics in our community. First, there's the largest population increase in demographic we saw was among Asian and multiracial. That's 2 or more race, individual and families. Interestingly, the 23 and 24 school district enrollment demographics show us that now, for the first time, white students are a minority in the district on Mercer Island. Also, we found that seniors comprise a large percent, 27% of our population, Again, just demographics to help guide us and as we think about this. Next slide. This slide points out some of those changes in race and ethnicity on Mercer Island. We looked from 2010 to 2022 and looked at some comparisons to regional cities, in this case Bainbridge Island, Kirkland, and Bellevue. I'll give council a second and viewers just to take a look at the slide. If that's legible, hopefully it's not too small. The large dark blue to gray sections in the bottom of each of those categories, with Mercer Island being the three columns on the left, are folks who identify as white alone. You see those numbers shrinking, which makes sense as we diversify across the region and on Mercer Island. The sort of aqua blue that's increasing on Mercer Island from 19 to 22% are folks who identify as Asian alone. So one thing that we look at is just who the demographic, or who is living on Mercer Island, who's moving to Mercer Island. Folks who tend to be new to the community generally need extra supports from organizations like us for navigating resources and getting supports. Next slide. Here's a bit just to highlight the race and ethnicity changes in the school district on Mercer Island. This looks at different race and ethnicities between the 2012-13 school year and the 23-24 school year. Of note, again, Asian students increasing from 19 to 27%. Those identifying as two or more races increasing from 5 to 15%, and the overall student body actually decreasing. And that's a bit of interest, but it looks like that could be stabilizing. That's the school district has more information on that. Next slide, please. So student sexual orientation by percentage and grade level in 2023. Students that identify as non-straight tend to have more behavioral health needs or greater risks for depression, anxiety, suicidality, substance use. So for us, keeping tabs on the number of folks that meet that criteria, it just allows us better insight into how to better support students. Next slide, please. There's a change in age distribution, and again, YFS, works from kids preschool all the way through end of life, and so we do take a hard look at where those numbers are falling in terms of where the needs are relative to the number of resources that we have. This chart looks, again, from 2010 to 2012, with 2010 being the outlined lines and the blue being where 2012 or 2022 lies, with some decreases in folks 80 and over, and from 40 to 49 with some increases in younger families. Next slide, please. So for the next category, this high-level takeaways from youth mental health and well-being. At the highest level, we found in our surveys and needs assessment that this is a high-achieving community. Kids are under a lot of stress to achieve, and the pressure to succeed is something that kids still talk about a lot. The pressure is from all of us. It's culture. It's also a lot from the kids themselves, which we found very interesting. They continue to say that. That we here have higher than state average levels of alcohol and marijuana use, as well as anxiety. That goes along with some of the high stress in the community. For many years, the substance use rates among youth in our community have been significantly lower than state average for our younger kids. And then somewhere around 10th or 11th grade, that tends to flip, and we've been above state average. I'll have slides in a second that demonstrate the good news, which is the long-term trends, is that that's going down. However, there's obviously still concern. Depression and suicide rates are close to state average, but obviously still too high. We've talked about over the past few years, and this has been a conversation across the country, that youth are in a mental health crisis. There's a lot of different pressures on youth. There's the impact of social media. There's substance use issues. We're not immune to it here. We have some strengths on Mercer Island. We have some good resources and good supports, and that's some great news, but kids still have some struggles. We found also that access to supportive adults on Mercer Island for our youth, access to health and mental health care is higher than state average and a big plus. I mean, to have access to some of these services for youth, especially teens, is really important. In Washington State, the age of consent for mental health care is 13 years old. is relatively young. Nationally, that means that kids at 13 can access mental health care without their parents' consent. There's pros and cons to that. One of the pros is, for example, with counselors in our schools, the middle and high school kids, if they're struggling at home or have an issue that they're afraid to talk about, they can go themselves and get counseling support. The flip of that can be that sometimes parents aren't involved as much as we'd like them to be, but that's what we try to navigate. And then finally, some really good news is that our students report higher than state average on something called the HOPE scale. That's something that's buried in the Healthy Youth Survey. It takes a conglomeration of survey responses to sort of say, okay, how positive are youth looking towards the future, that's a good metric for general mental health and well-being. So those are the big takeaways, a few details. Next slide, please. So here are a few quotes that we found interesting just to share from students that highlight some of what we were just saying. First being from a high school student, socializing with people online is way different than making friends in person. The pandemic stunted my social skills. It was a setback. We do see that. Our counselors talk about that often. Another quote, there's pressure to take rigorous courses. You completely disregard your mental health for academic excellence. And then finally, it's constantly the work that is balancing societal expectations for your future. We've got very successful, very sophisticated kids who tend to put themselves under and are under a lot of pressure to succeed. Next slide. This is the percent of Mercer Island students who experience anxiety, have depressed feelings, or have suicidal thoughts. This isn't the cheeriest slide per se, but this does highlight some of the work that we're doing and the importance of some of our outpatient and school-based work, sort of being on point for the needs of the community. The chart shows the lightest blue, grade 8, the middle blue, grade 10, and the darkest blue, grade 12, across 3 categories, the one on the left being anxiety, middle depression, and then right, suicide ideation. Anxiety is fairly high. I mean, that's with 12th graders reporting significant levels of anxiety, more than half. Depression is less, but as we often say, yes, it's good that 75–80% of kids aren't identifying with depressive symptomology, but the fact that 20 to 25, 27% are is more work to do. And I don't think that's unique to Mercer Island. I think we have some strengths, as I said before, where if you can be better in a depression scale for kids than state average, I mean, that's positive. We put a lot of resources to it, and we're going to continue to push on that, but I think it's important to take that in perspective. And then suicide ideation, this one's sort of, there's a couple that keep me up at night. This is the trends we're seeing with suicide ideation, and even though we're about the same as state average, is that the kids that are younger and younger are tending to show more symptoms related to self-harm. And so what that's translated to is some of our elementary level school counselors now more proactively having talks about suicide reduction and emotional regulation and management. This is not an overnight crisis. The pandemic didn't all of a sudden flip a switch where all of our young kids, that's not what I'm saying, that it's just trending in a direction where more younger kids are being impacted, or at least showing symptomology related to self-harm, which is something concerning, obviously, and something we pay close attention to. Next slide, please. This indicates with youth mental well-being a change in the percent of students reporting those depressed feelings or suicidal thoughts. So you can look at this over time a little bit. Like I said, it's not dramatic, but you can see some increases in folks considering attempting suicide and where depressed feelings are. So again, so YFS, so when I'm presenting this to say not this year to last year to the year before, what does it mean and what do we do? But to say, okay, if we step back a little bit and say, in our community, are kids in need of mental health care related to depression and suicide? Yes. Most kids are, yes. Here's where our kids are relative to others, and why I think it's important that we continue to do the work both outpatient and school-based. Next slide, please. An interesting metric that, as a parent myself and many of us here, we talk, I know I struggle with kids and sleep, but teenagers probably should get, according to the pediatricians, 8, 9+ hours a night. They should get that. Of interest in this slide is what we look at and we talk about with our school staff is just how much extra classes, how much extra homework, how much overfunctioning, how many of our kids compromise sleep for really wonderful academics, really wonderful extracurriculars, really wonderful sports teams, really wonderful volunteerism, really wonderful activities. However, there's a trade-off here because lack of sleep impacts both mental health and drug alcohol use in the long term. Next slide, please. This is the HOPE scale I was referring to earlier, where Mercer Island students are in blue across 4 categories compared to Washington State in green, 4 categories being the 4 grades, grades 6, 8, 10, and 12, with the darkest blue, the darkest color being highly hopeful, and then upwards towards moderately hopeful. Of course, we'd like to see all students be 100% hopeful. I think it's positive that on Mercer Island our kids do show good signs of hope, but again, this has to do with overall physical health, psychological health, and social well-being. So kudos for the community support to parents, to schools, to all of us that can give kids people to connect with and talk to and supports when they most need it. Next slide, please. Drug and alcohol issues among youth and young adults. Clearly a concern. We want this to be at 0. It never has been, might never be, but we continue to work towards decreasing the risks related to this. Mercer Island kids and young adults, teens and young adults, not unlike their peers statewide, alcohol and cannabis use are the 2 #1 drugs of choice. As I said before, our grades 10 and 12 persistently seem to be above state average. And I'll show in a slide again, both Washington State and Mercer Island youth, though rates are decreasing over time, just of course not as much as I'd personally like or as fast. Binge drinking on Mercer Island is a challenge. Binge drinking is, and we'll have a slide about this, it's excessive use of alcohol over 1 episode. I'll talk about that in a second. As I said before, good news, alcohol use is declining over time. Vape use is increasing, and with loose regulations around the marketplace for that and easy access. And fentanyl that we've all talked about and heard about over the past 1.5 years or so does remain a concern regionally. And quote-unquote good news is there's about 0 use statistically on Mercer Island. However, our staff have worked with youth who have issues with fentanyl. It's the second of 3 things that keeps me up sometimes at night. Next slide, please. This highlights the percent of Mercer Island students reporting substance use within the past 30 days. The past 30 days is a proxy just for current use. How many kids are using somewhat regularly? And the slide on the far left, and again, apologies for the small script, the far left is fentanyl use. For the first time, the Healthy Youth Survey actually asked about fentanyl specifically. It's in the 3 categories being left to right, and each of those sub-bars is grade 8, 10, and 12. So very close to 0, if 0. The margin of error isn't shown on these slides, but it's probably 3 to 5%. Prescription drugs is next, where it says 1%, 2%, and 2%. Then when it starts to elevate in the middle of the chart there is that it's for e-cigarettes and vape pens. One of the concerns about those is that because it's really unregulated, kids can get access to vape cartridges online pretty easily, and they just don't know what's in them. We run surveys and asking kids, well, do you know what you're vaping? And 25, 40% saying, no, but it's vape. And again, a real concern because not just chemicals that could be in it, but other items. We do a lot of work, and Michelle does with our prevention efforts on not just drug alcohol, but vape as well. It's more of an emerging issue. And then marijuana and alcohol remains, again, fairly high the older you get. There's been a lot of work with drug and alcohol prevention. Michelle's done a bunch of work with that. We do the work currently in the high school and in the community. So again, should we continue to focus on it? Our take is yes, and we continually are doing the work. Next slide, please. This is the third of 3 that kind of concerns me is the binge drinking stats. There's a footnote I want to explain about these data. Mercer Island School District administers the survey, the Healthy Youth Survey that captures these data within 2 weeks of homecoming. And I bring that up because homecoming may be on Mercer Island a night where there's heavier alcohol use among youth. And so the survey on Mercer Island captures that as opposed to not every other survey in the state. So grain of salt when comparing to the state, but nevertheless, when we talk about 5 or more drinks in a row, our drug and alcohol counselor at the high school reminds me that 5 or more often is or more, and that's the real concern when we have kids drinking 2 to 3 times that sometimes. Our partnerships with police, our partnerships with school, our partnership with the pediatricians on the island, it's a community effort to try to deal with the 3 things that bring down drug alcohol use among kids, which is good enforcement of laws and in homes and school rules, reducing access to substances, and healthy community norms that support non-use. Next slide, please. Here's the downward trends over time. If folks just want to see this from 2006 to 2023, the top line is any alcohol use among kids, and the bottom is binge drinking. You'll probably see a theme with some of these data, which is perhaps long-term longitudinal positive trends. Big picture is it good enough? No, there's more work to be done. Next slide, please. Fourth for us is parenting. So high-level takeaways from the needs assessment around parent issues. Kind of post-pandemic, what are we seeing? Parents are reporting experiencing burnout, high levels of stress. The next slide talks about a Surgeon General report, much like the Surgeon General put out a report on youth mental health. The report is on parents being under pressure. The pandemic put a lot of pressure on parents to parent in a way they weren't accustomed to. Having kids at home, sort of locked down online, created a lot of challenges and a lot of stress. Kids regressed a little bit developmentally, and parents need support to navigate through that. It also locked parents at home together sometimes and created some couples issues, and so there was just a lot going on. Our counselors saw a lot of diversity of need when it came to that. And then finally, the growing demand for culturally relevant resources and equipping immigrant parents with tools. We have a lot of immigrants on Mercer Island that I think are hidden sometimes, whether it's folks in the tech or other industries that come for jobs, whether it's folks that come out of areas in the world where there's war. We have both, and we tend to serve both in different ways. One may be getting additional resources and connecting with counselors, others with basic needs and stabilization efforts. Next slide, please. This is just reference to the Surgeon General's advisory that kind of punctuates the need for us to support parents some more. The Best Starts for Kids grant that we were awarded by King County is going to allow us to begin, actually later this month, school-to-school parent support groups that have to do with building parent and child connections and leveraging the parentingmercerisland.com site that Michelle and her team built over the past couple of years with grants from SAMHSA and the federal government. Next slide, please. The next category, 5 out of 7, is what we heard from the community about the need for community and connection. The pandemic really had a significant impact on people's sense of belonging. I think one of the great things about Mercer Island is the community, is the connection, is the islanders taking care of islanders mentality. That is a big deal. And for YFS, it's a big deal for behavioral health. If that means people have support, they have informal people to talk to, they have peers that can lend a shoulder. All those things are critically important to overall community health. One parent said, quote, "As a community, we need opportunities to organically connect, social in-person support, and safe, fun places for kids and adults are things we're lacking as a community." And this is something parents were saying, and as we framed focus groups as, the differences between pandemic and now. So it's a good litmus for us in terms of YFS and what we can do with our town hall events that we're hosting, providing where we can, and of course we're here in the community center where there's many other opportunities, but where we, at least as YFS, can provide some additional opportunities for connection and support in that way. Next slide, please. The sixth of seventh categories for us was seniors and older adults, and the big takeaways from the focus groups and the needs assessment was: one, seniors can still face isolation and lack of connection. Our elderly residents are impacted by limited transportation and limited local resources. And it's not just Mercer Island, but that's part of what our seniors are telling us here. Seniors are experiencing mental health issues, specifically anxiety, depression, grief, memory loss. I'd add also substance use issues. We work with seniors around substance challenges, particularly with legal marijuana and opiates. But it's just something to point out that folks don't often think about. Need for increased communication about resources, activities, and opportunities was a takeaway. One of our senior staff, our senior services staff people noted, not only do we get seniors wanting more resources recently and opportunities for connection, but also their adult children who want resources to help their aging parents. I was just having a conversation prior to the meeting about the sandwich generation and how we do have folks here that are simultaneously trying to raise kids and support aging adults, and how YFS could maybe support them. Next slide, please. Here's a few a bit complicated demographics, but the point with this is to talk about households with seniors living alone versus not living alone. On Mercer Island, seniors age 60 plus comprise about 27% of our population, and 33%, a third of those, are living alone. Next slide, please. The challenge with living alone shows up places like this, where housing cost burden status, so the percentage of people's incomes, often seniors living alone are on fixed incomes, don't have a lot of flexibility in their personal revenue streams. The top of that chart shows that seniors, elderly folks living by themselves or with non-family members with their roommate, are the most severely cost burdened in terms of housing in our community. Next slide. And finally, basic needs. What did we hear from the community in our focus groups around this? Poverty rates in Mercer Island, I think, are up from, I believe, 4.5% to 5%. There's an increased demand for support just with meeting basic needs in general. Although the pandemic has eased, we're at a point now where many federal supports are sunsetting. And so again, there's challenges. It's been in the local news lately, challenges still with people facing eviction and homelessness. People with financial insecurity, stressors include unexpected employment and medical issues, childcare costs, inflation, and then again, demand for food assistance. It had quadrupled during the pandemic. Current levels are now down, thankfully, and we feel like we're fairly well positioned to support those with the mobile food market and some of the switches we've made back to shelf-stable and fresh foods. But still they're elevated from where they were pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. Just a quick blurb about household income. I mean, no surprise when you look at kind of where we are on impacts of folks and basic needs. Mercer Island's in blue with a median household income. 2010 is the black line box, and then 2022 is where we are, which is 190,000 median, and many above that, many below that. We're one of the higher in the region, just below Sammamish. But again, it creates a dynamic where folks that struggle sometimes are faced with the contrast of being in a community with some significantly high household incomes. And part of what we do is navigate with them how to get resources and work that through despite that extra challenge. Next slide, please. And then rent. We have a rent assistance program that provides up to $3,000 one time a year, which pretty much covers just 1 month's rent on Mercer Island. That's part of our housing stability program that aims to stop eviction. I mean, we work with folks, not just with rent assistance dollars as a one-time, but anybody who gets rent assistance needs to work with our case managers and get linked to other resources, to employment services, and other supports. Next slide, please. To sort of wrap up for tonight, we're going to talk through just some considerations I may have already spoken to, and I'll pause after each of these if council has questions or comments about any of these. I'll talk about considerations for youth, parents, and seniors in the community. First, to talk about youth a little bit, some of our takeaways and what YFS is doing. Youth mental health is still a concern. We continue to believe that our low barrier access to mental health in the schools and the community is critical. We have counselors in every Mercer Island high school, 2 counselors at the middle school, 2 counselors at the high school. One of the high school counselors is a drug and alcohol specialist. I was talking with my colleague prior to this. One of my favorite quotes about this is from SAMHSA that says that youth that have mental health needs, that have counselors in the schools, are 20 times more likely to get mental health care than without counselors in the school. That speaks to access, and I think that's critically important. Another takeaway for us is continued focus on prevention services to address youth and young adult drug and alcohol misuse. We have the Healthy Youth Initiative, which is a volunteer community coalition led by Michelle, where community members, youth, other professionals come together and work collectively on prevention strategies. I was speaking before about prevention can kind of boil down to good enforcement, dealing with access to substances and enforcing positive norms. A bit simplified, but that's what we do a lot with our media, on the socials in the community, in the schools, education efforts to parents. Mayor, you helped us host a town hall on fentanyl not too long ago. Those sorts of efforts all kind of fit into that prevention category. Also for youth, encouraging broader definition of success and belonging. Our kids are high-achieving kids and stressed. And so what we can do in YFS, I think, is to continue to support kids that are beyond sort of the breaking point and to get counseling support and find good resources, support families, and help that definition of success be one where kids realize there are multiple pathways for everybody to find success. Elevating youth voice came up. Youth talked a lot about feeling empowered, feeling positive, hopeful, but looking for more opportunity to get their voice out there. So we're talking with youth about what that means. And then continued youth parent suicide prevention education. It's just too critical to not do. We're lucky to have staff at our middle school, Harry Brown, and our high school, Chris Harnish, who are both experts in suicide prevention training, and will continue to give trainings to the community, to parents online and kids in the school and classroom. Perhaps it's overdue, but let me take a quick pause to see if folks have questions or comments about kind of either what we said before or the youth issues in particular.
Do you have more slides, or is this near the end?
I have a couple more slides about parents. Do you want me to wait until the end?
Yeah, let's wrap up with
Okay,
that.
great. The next slide, please. Parents, some of the big considerations for us. Expanding parent education. That's the Parenting Mercer Island site is one of our big tools in that domain. We built that, as I said, over the past couple of years. Another is providing opportunities for parent-child connections. The Best Starts for Kids grant. Thank you, King County, for the support. Look for a new, we're calling them parent labs, to start for elementary, middle, and high parents by the end of the month. And for us to tailor parent programs to meet the demographic. There are a lot of non-English speaking folks coming to the island, a lot of folks coming for the first time that just don't know how to fit in. Mercer Island kids tend to be born here, come back here. Parents come back here and raise their families. It can be insular, and so we do a lot of work supporting folks sort of fitting in and finding how to get formal and informal supports. And for parents, encouraging opportunity for community connection. Next slide, please. Second to last slide. Considerations for seniors. We're looking at YFS, Senior Support Services and Opportunities for Connection. We have our senior services provider. They provide case management for seniors, access to Medicare, referrals for residential supports, and working with adult children. We're looking at for seniors in needs of immigrant families and considering those language barriers and cultural differences. Looking at senior support programs, this last year we started 3 new support programs for seniors out of YFS, which I think was fantastic. One being support for folks caring for a partner with dementia, another being support groups for seniors living alone, and a third being something that's called Death Cafe, but what it means is it's a place for people to come and talk honestly and openly about end-of-life issues. Sometimes there's not a good place to do that. Next slide, please, and we'll wrap up, Mr. Mayor. The last slide is just considerations that came out of the report for community and YFS's role as it is in the community in the behavioral health space. One is to continue to support our most vulnerable folks and neighbors with basic needs. We have the YFS has an emergency assistance program. We have the mobile food market. We also provide support for employment. Next is to address specific needs arising from the demographic changes. And historically marginalized group, we do intentional work with Chinese Parent Association, LGBTQIA plus groups, parents of kids with disabilities, so trying to find spaces for them to get supports and additional needs met. And then finally, stronger or more meaningful connections, as I said before, what YFS can do to create spaces for that around some of these issues and hosting town halls. And with that, Mayor, just thank you for your attention, and we're done. I'm glad to take any questions or comments.
Okay, I'm sure there'll be a few. Let me just start by, I want to, of course, thank your staff, right? All the counselors in the school, the community, wherever they're placed, or the volunteers, everybody within that YFS chain has just done tremendous work. I want to start by saying that is the best report that we have ever received from YFS. Not the data, you know, like the story that it tells, but in terms of the quality and the conciseness and the actionable kind of outcome-based things that you're working on and the way that you're directing your staff to really respond to what they're seeing in the community. And it's not to say that it's been done wrong in the past, but the pandemic has been a big shift. The region, the growth, the housing, there's just been a lot of issues in the community. The way that you guys have reacted to fentanyl and not being afraid to ask the question, but incorporate that stuff into the surveys. And then, of course, working to bring the community out. We had, I think, over 400 people show up for that fentanyl event that was here in the community center. I was just at the DEA a month ago, and they said that it is still to date, in all the years they've been doing it, the biggest presentation that they've done to a community. And it was a catalyst for getting into Tacoma School District. So every school in Tacoma has had now a DEA one pill can kill presentation because of the credibility that they got out of presenting to Mercer Island to over 400 folks. And that's credit to you guys, because you really brought the numbers out for that, and they're deeply grateful for that. I'm also a parent of a 9-year-old, and so, you know, you look at this type of data and it is sobering to see, and to know that we have resources in the community working to change these things for the better is just, it's deeply heartwarming. Makes me know that just this community's support of YFS, the YFS mission, the thrift shop, the foundation, everybody that's working on those goals, shared goals, we're doing the right thing. And we're a unique community having that social services stack within the city services, which is not found, you know, around us. And I just thank you for that work.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, I'll be brief. To Derek and Michelle and your entire staff, my thanks as well. Excellent work as always. There's, of course, a lot more work to be done. I had a question about the Best Start for Kids grant. Was it a grant for a single year's worth of work, or is it like a 3 or 5 year grant?
Oh, thank you. It's a 3-year grant for, I think, $288,000 that supports one staff and partial payment for school counseling support to provide in-school work. So it's 3 years with the possibility to re-up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I'll second what the mayor said. I think I agree with everything he said. Just a quick question, Derek. I noticed a couple times in the presentation, in the report, there's talk about reinstituting the Youth Advisory Board. Mm-hmm. Curious if that's something on your radar. And then I guess the second question is there a need or a want for a sort of, from a senior perspective, to have a similar advisory board? Is that something you've considered, or how would there be any interplay there?
Yeah, thank you. It has been on our radar. I think part of the metric for us is to determine capacity at YFS in the city for board work takes some effort. I think the idea of a board makes sense, both for youth and potentially for seniors. There is a senior commission that is a couple people strong that exists in the community. We've been in touch with them and have agreed, for example, they were doing a newsletter that YFS is going to take on that newsletter moving forward, just to give to respond to one of the issues about getting the needs more visible. In terms of reconstituting those, I think that would be a good offline discussion to have in terms of elevating youth voice and where that could land. I think there's nuances to that and figuring out where it would fit in the community and the portfolio of YFS. So I welcome the discussion.
Yeah, give me a call whenever you can. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay, Councilmember Weicker.
I just want to say +1 to what Mayor Neese said. My kids did really well through the schools because of the counselors and because of the support and the programs that are there. And so I just want to give you a few minutes to brag about what the counselors are doing in our school and what our counselors are doing in our community. They do really great work and really tailor to the needs of the schools and the communities and whatever's happening. So take a few minutes to tell us about those programs. I just love them.
Oh, well, thank you. Gosh, so our school-based counselors are pretty much impacting every student in the district. Our elementary folks go into classrooms with social emotional development strategies and curricula. They're meeting kids in hallways, they're doing lunch groups, they're lunch buddy programs, and they're also doing one-on-one therapy in the school, which is remarkable because kids get that resource. Our middle school folks continue to do programs to support kids during a transitional year, like sources of strength and web where everybody belongs, to pair older kids with younger kids that kind of support that mentorship, as well as sort of the suicide training and intervention, so kids know what to do and what to say if some of their peers are struggling. At the high school, we're also in the classrooms at great detail, but also working really closely with the high school administration around supporting kids who get in trouble. And so it's, we don't have a diversion program per se, but our staff work closely with kids who might do something off grounds or at an event or something that rather than purely get, deal with punishment or consequences, can see a counselor, can get a drug alcohol assessment, can do some of that work. So some of that's critical. And then I think in general for us to be able to provide mental health care currently at no cost for kids who, I said before, if you're over 13, you can go down the hall and say, I'm struggling, I'm not sure where to turn to. They can just knock on the door and have that confidentially. So thank you for the opportunity and for the support.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum. Oh, Councilmember Jacobson.
If you could just give me a referral about food pantry, and you don't need to do it here, just send me a text or something, because I know that program has changed around, and what you're looking for from the community in the way of, shelf-safe goods or whatever they're called would be, I think would be good. And that if you're dependent on that, or if that accelerates your program or enhances what you can do, if people are dropping stuff off someplace, I'd like to know more about it to, shake the trees that I shake. Then I'd like to make a comment. There's a man named Walter Cizalou who was one of Nelson Mandela's close colleagues, both at prison and afterwards. And he had said something that I think is very meaningful and very descriptive of what YFS does. His comment was, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made in the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. And I think that very much epitomizes what I see you guys doing, and good on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you, members of the Council. Mr. Mayor, you pointed out earlier the importance of and the uniqueness of a city having its own behavioral health department. It's remarkably unique. I don't know of other cities, maybe a few in the country, that have that, but for us to be able to fund it so much internally, and to be able to turn around and give it to our communities, a big benefit. It's makes me really love my job, and I thank you for everybody on the Council for the support and letting us exist. It really makes a difference, so thank you.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, Derek, just on the substance abuse question, you talked a little bit about the vape pens or e-cigarettes and sort of understanding some of the sources there. Do you have a similar data set for example, marijuana use or prescription drugs in terms of, as it comes to prescription drugs, are those drugs that are in the home, or is it prescription abuse? And then on the marijuana side, is it black market sales versus dispensaries? Do you have any data around that, or is that a little too?
We do, and we can get more to you, but I think generally on the marijuana side of things, we're seeing it's not pre and post pandemic, but it's more pre-legalization, post-legalization. About the same number of youth are using cannabis as were before. However, the big change is the potency. Cannabis in the 70s and 80s was 2, 3, 4% THC. Right now in Seattle, you can't buy or find cannabis flower, smokable product that's under probably 22%. And so it's not 100 times stronger, it's 4 to 5 times stronger, but that's a big difference. And so the issue is that more kids are getting access to higher potency cannabis, which is the challenge on the illicit side of things. And the access is just less of an issue these days. I mean, I think that was a big concern because access. But I think if it's going to, if we're going to be legal for the state to run a monopoly and have some control, probably benefits our kids a little bit. A lot of kids say they get it from peers, and those peers get it from near peers, and those peers get it from folks who are legal. And so, in terms of use, though, I think the challenge with cannabis is the high potency and the quick delivery. So you can vaporize high potency THC at 80–90% pure in a vape-like device, and the one hit impact is so great. You won't overdose or die from that, but you can make some really bad decisions, driving, other things that can put you and other people at risk. But if you'd like more details about the health use survey, I provided the council in your attachment an overview. It's thick. I'm happy to provide the full report for your knowledge.
That'd be great, thanks.
Okay, with that, we'll close it down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item of business is a study session number 2, which is AB 6597, which is the 2025-2026 communication goals. And we'll welcome Chief of Administration Ali Speaks.
Do you need another one?
Okay, Mason. is-
I got an automated introduction. Thanks, Sally. Sorry. That's great. Good evening, Council. For the record, I'm Mason Lavera. I'm your Communications Manager here at the City. And tonight I'm here to give you an overview of our 2025 through 2026 communications goals. Now, over the past year, we've taken a holistic look at all the different ways we communicate as a city and tried to think about where there are opportunities for improvement, where are things that we can lean into that are working well, and what are some efficiencies we can create internally to help balance the workload. Next slide, please. So when we talk about communications, what does that mean? Is my audio going in and out?
It just stays 6 to 10 inches away.
All right, we'll do that better.
Don't get too close.
So when we talk about communications, what we're really looking at is all the different ways we get the word out about things that are happening at the city, decisions you're making as a council, and how we engage with the community to make sure they're aware about the work that we're doing. Our primary channels, of course, we lean very heavily on social media. So Facebook, Nextdoor, Instagram, Twitter, X. We also leverage our Let's Talk engagement platform. We use the city website for news updates and other more stationary information. And then, of course, our media relations, working with the local paper, regional outlets, and our partner agencies, so the school district, right? We do a really good job of making sure we're getting the word out through a variety of different channels. Next slide, please. In the last decade or so, and really in the last 3 years, a lot has changed on the communications landscape. We see a big difference in the way that people are trying to receive information and then competing for those attention spans. And that creates challenges for us. So now when we put something up on our social media pages, right, if we put something on Facebook that's a block of text with an image, we're not getting the same level of engagement that we would if we were using a short form video, for example. And so that's something that we're looking to address over the next 2 years. Next slide, please. So what are our needs, right? I think it comes as no surprise to you that we've had a very busy few years, and we're going to continue to be very busy. And at the city, that means we have a lot of competing priorities and needs for communications. We could have a great event happening here at the community center that we need to promote, and at the same time have an emergency water main break that we need to address, right? We're constantly having to get the word out about a variety of different things. And our staffing structure, with me being a team of 1, means that I'm constantly jumping between those, right? So part of what we're trying to do over the next 2 years is lean into that and solve for that with more efficiency. Next slide. So what's our plan? To ensure that we can meet all of those needs, we are trying to work smarter and not harder. And that's where when I talk about operational efficiency, we're really looking at ways we can improve our processes to build extra capacity so that we can continue to get the word out about more and more things. And our 2025-2026 communications goals document is built off of 7 key pillars to do that work, and I'll walk you through each of those tonight. Next slide. So what are our 7 pillars? I'll go through each of them and of course provide more context about them, and then we'll open up for opportunity for questions. But the 7 are better, more engaging content, so improving the ways that we do share out information, new content management tools, a department self-service structure, so building more capacity within each department to help with communications, redesigning our email marketing, switching the city to use Canva for Teams, rebranding the thrift shop, and implementing a photo management system. Next slide. So the first one, better, more engaging content. Now what I talked about with our social media in particular, which is our primary way of getting the word out about city operations, a lot has changed in that landscape as I discussed. What we're trying to do is identify who our audience is and how they get information. And we know a lot about them, right? We can look at our analytics to learn more about who they may be and the way that they interact, but we also know that the way that we share our content matters. So traditionally, we might take a couple photos and put a block of text up on our Facebook page, for instance, and hope that that gets the word out. But in reality, with the changes that are happening with social media algorithms and our competition for attention spans, that's not panning out to the level of engagement we'd like to see. So now what we want to do is lean more into storytelling. We're going to instead change the way to be more proactive and say, here's some great things that have happened to the city this week. Let's do a mini video series instead of just throwing it up in a text update, right? Let's go behind the scenes and take a GoPro camera down into our water infrastructure, right? Show people what it is we're talking about and follow some of those evolving trends to make sure that that content is more engaging for folks. Next slide. Managing all of that is a real challenge. So we want to implement new content management tools, and one tool in particular. There are a lot of software platforms out there that communication pros like myself use. One's called Hootsuite, you've probably heard of it. The problem is they're not purpose-built for local government, and they have some missing links there that make our jobs really difficult. It adds some more manual labor to make sure we're retaining records correctly, for instance. Or when there needs to be redundancy, for instance, if I'm out of the office, it's difficult for other people to be able to access those platforms. There is, however, a new tool called Orlo, which is based out of the UK, which is purpose-built for local government. And in my research last year looking at new solutions for us, this came up. And I'm very excited to say we're actually going to be the first customer in the US to use this platform. They are built from the ground up for local government, and they fit our needs perfectly. So integrating this tool will allow us not only to be able to better schedule all of the different communication needs that we have, but then get that word out in automated ways so that it builds more capacity for me to work with other teams to make sure that we're identifying more and more story ideas. All right, next slide. The third pillar is building a department self-service structure. Again, with our staffing model, it oftentimes requires me to jump between very different things, right? I could be working with YFS on a great new program they have in the schools, and then having to respond to a major fire in town center. We never really know what that looks like, but we do know that we need to have some redundancy in our communications model. I've been working with the directors to figure out who within their teams can serve as a liaison for me specific to communications, so that when we do have a major lift, for instance, in CPD with our comprehensive plan periodic review process, I can lean on someone internally to assist with building some of those materials and help free up more capacity to support other departments at the same time. All right, next slide. The fourth is redesigning our email marketing platform. Right now we have the MI Weekly newsletter, which goes out every Wednesday to the community, and it's actually quite successful. We have an average open rate of 64%. The industry average is 11%, and if you look at all types of organizations, your average open rate is only 3%. So we're doing a good job. The problem is it's quite a lengthy read. It's a very traditional model. It's 5 different articles, right, with a lot of text. And we know people are, again, they're skimming through their inbox. We want to make sure we're conveying the most important information in the best way. So what we're going to do is rebuild the MI Weekly to be a little bit lighter, to be able to be more flexible for our needs. So if it's a slower week, we can actually focus more in depth on one thing. And when it's a very busy time, we can include just quick highlights that we know folks need to know in the community. At the same time, we're also building another element of this platform to support major projects so that our only email is not the MI Weekly. So while the MI Weekly goes out every single Wednesday, a major project like the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review can have its own content that can go out at any given time that's most appropriate for that project. Next slide. The fifth is migrating the city to Canva for Teams. Right now, if anyone in the city needs support with producing a flyer or a graphic or needs to grab a logo file, that process is manual. And we still utilize a lot of the Adobe software, which is what graphic designers would use. Canva, if you're not familiar, is a web-based graphic design platform that has some amazing AI tools built into it. It's really easy for folks to quickly generate something that looks really good and download it in the right format that they need. Canva for Teams is built for organizations like us, where we can actually create a central brand kit. So every element of the city's colors, logo files, letterheads, whatever template we need, lives online, and any staff person can log in, say, oh, I need an event flyer, and they can generate that, input their content. The system automatically makes it look like the city of Mercer Island, and they can download it in any format they need. This will free up a lot of capacity for us and make it easier for other staff to kind of regularly steward their own communication needs. Next slide. Our sixth, rebranding the thrift shop. This is a unique one. We are in the line of retail business as well as everything else we do in the city. And retail businesses require a different level of marketing support. And we haven't necessarily been stewarding that in the most effective way possible. There's a lot of great tools out there to automate our marketing for the thrift shop, which will help support their e-commerce business, but also give them more of an identity to stand on their own. We're working with a marketing agency to help us rebrand the thrift shop to give them their own identity, but then integrate that across all the different platforms they use, including their website, which is also their online store, their own social media, and their own email marketing. Our goal is to integrate all of this in a way where the automation on the marketing side allows for easier staff access to all the different tools, but then keeps that consistent so that we have more and more opportunities to engage customers and drive sales for the thrift shop. Next slide. And last but certainly not least is our photo management system. Right now, the city does not have a centralized resource for all of our photo and video assets. This means all of our different teams are saving the photos they're taking out in the field or that they're using to document project progress all over a server, and that makes it difficult for me to find those assets or anyone else who needs them. We're going to integrate a new tool that uses tagging ability as well as geolocation, so that if I need a photo of Mercerdale Park taken last year, I can simply search that and every photo of that subject will appear. This is going to be a huge lift for our teams because we spend quite a bit of time trying to find these assets, and it's not a very efficient use of it. So I'm excited for that one. All right, next slide. So those are the 7 key pillars, and it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm pretty confident we can get it done. And the reason is, if you go to the next slide, Allie, we already have 4 of them underway. So all 7 are slated to be complete at the end of 2026, and some of them are already in action now. So over the next 2 years, you'll see more and more changes. Most of it's been behind the scenes so far. A lot of it's going to become very visible in the next few months, and I'm excited to see what it results for us. Next slide, Allie. Evaluation is always important when it comes to communications, and we have 3 key outcomes that we hope to achieve. The first is greater visibility. As we broaden our net, we'll be able to engage more and more folks so that people are actually seeing the good work that's happening here at the city and feel engaged with their community. Increasing that awareness, which is different than visibility, means people are understanding the content that they're seeing. And we want them to have a good sense of what is actually occurring and know what that means for them as community members. And the third is engagement. We're hoping that with all of this increased visibility and awareness, we're also able to drive more engagement and therefore excitement in the operations at the city. We're hoping that will garner more and more support. Next slide. And that's the overview. If there's any questions I can answer, please fire away.
Well, let me just start by saying I don't think we need any more excitement between all the water main breaks, bomb cyclones, and everything else we got going on. It's been pretty exciting. Council, any questions? Councilmember Jacobson.
Yeah, what out-of-pocket costs are there for Orlo and Canva, if that's the appropriate pronunciations?
Yep, you got it. Orlo costs us about $5,000 a year, and Canva is about $250 a month. Those costs are set to change over the next few years. Canva, we hope, will actually go down based on our licensing needs, but we're not exactly sure in actuality all the different licenses we'll need. And what I mean by that is if it's only 5 of us using this on any given day, that's only 5 licenses. If we end up needing to scale that to be 10 staff persons, those license costs go up. Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, I'm just kind of curious. It strikes me that the content you guys produce has always been great. It sounds like you're gonna make it even better. Kudos to you for that. But one thing we struggle with is reach. The city mailing list or email list is still pretty small. What strategies are out there for increasing reach or penetration? So for example, if we thought about running ads saying, hey, are you tired of being in the dark? Send an email here to get on our mailing list, something like that.
Great question, Councilmember Reynolds, and I think I actually skipped over that in the presentation. We know that a digital-only approach doesn't work, especially given the island in our audience, and so we have plans to do all-island mailers to say, hey, if you want to get emails from the city, here's what they look like and here's how to sign up, as well as doing more engagement in person at our events.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Also, Councilmember Reynolds, we are going to be implementing a new platform for mass notifications. And so our hope is that we can integrate a kind of sign up here for city, general city emails, pick your topic, that will go along with us collecting information and contact information for folks so that we can connect directly to them when there's something in their neighborhood or something island-wide that they need to know. So we've got opportunities to collect more data.
That actually leads beautifully into what was going to be my next question, but I'll wait my turn.
Okay, Councilmember Weicker, then Jacobson.
I just want to say thank you for wading through all the tools and resources that are out there for this communication that's happening. Mason, it's just overwhelming sometimes, and I see what my 23-year-old can do in 5 minutes that I couldn't do for hours years ago. So I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to AI and how that's influencing your work in communications, either for good or for bad, and where you see that coming with all the tools that you have and that our staff will be able to self-serve down the road. I love that.
Absolutely. My perspective as a professional in the area is that AI is a great tool for productivity, but it doesn't necessarily storytell for you. And if you look at the different resources that are out there right now that folks in the field are using, it's a great starting point. But AI at this point can't pick up on nuance of your community. It can't pick up on tone, and it can't pick up on perspective about what else is happening at any given time. A lot of the tools, the platforms that we use, such as what we're talking about with Orlo, have great AI capabilities built in, but they are monitored, meaning we can set parameters around what that looks like. A good example of this is we get a lot of frequent questions coming in as direct messages on our social media accounts, right? How do I report X issue, or I want to speak to someone about Y? There's an ability for us to use AI to help automate those responses. The beauty is it frees up our time because we're not having to do that, but it also can get people information very quickly. So we're looking at those kinds of opportunities to really lean into AI. We're not looking at AI as a replacement to make sure that we're saying the right things at the right time, right? That still has a human element.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
Yes, my question is, are we looking to increase the volume or the amount of content we're sending out, or are we trying to sharpen our stick, our content stick, or both, or I'm not quite sure what the balance is on that one.
It's a great question. There are two concentric circles, right? One is broadening our audience and increasing the volume of content, so doing more. The other is doing it better. And that overlap is where we're really trying to emphasize, right? Blanketing our social media platforms with 20 updates a day does not actually accomplish anything, because if you want to look at the specifics on the back end of the algorithm, right, you're oversaturating our community. But doing more than 2 or 3, so let's say 5, but doing them really well, so short form video, great photo, right, behind the scenes looks, making sure we're getting people the content that we think they want to see, that's the opportunity for success, because it results in the greatest engagement per post.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Mason. I'm curious, on the social side, sort of what metrics are you using? Are you kind of tracking against engagements or impression? Like I'm just kind of curious what you're thinking about there.
Yeah, that's a great question. We look at both things, right? We look at impressions, and then we look at engagement. And the difference for most people, impressions are people seeing the content. Engagement is them doing something meaningful with it. So whether that's actually reading the full length of text, or leaving a comment, or sharing it. Something that is interesting that we have to remind ourselves is that given our community's demographics, we can't compare our social media metrics apples to a lot of other communities. because the ways that people use social media is very different by generation. And so what we always have to be mindful of is not latching on to the latest trend in social media, but what makes sense for the ways our community engages online. And so we look at those metrics as a guiding light to say what content do we put out that does better than others, right? But we don't look at it as a performative analysis on are we doing the right type of content. Because if you compared those numbers from Mercer Island to another community that has a significantly larger population of younger users, you'll see a very different use case for different social media platforms than we do here on the island.
So we're not gonna need TikTok account anytime soon?
I'll never say never.
No, that's great. I think obviously the 64% open rate on the email is pretty ecstatic, and I'll volunteer the mayor and myself for a behind-the-scenes video.
All right, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, you spoke largely about what I'll characterize as the routine communication. Ms. Speets gave an introduction a minute ago to the mass communication, and that's something that particularly interests me, that in the event of another disaster, a bomb, cyclone, a water system outage, et cetera, we need a way to reach everybody, or as close to everybody as we can get. What can you tell us about the tools that are available and how they're going to change as we move forward to 2025?
Absolutely. So as Ali mentioned, we now have a new tool for mass notification, which allows us to send text messages to those signed up. One of the beauties of our community is that we have very high engagement on Nextdoor, and you can think of the platform what you wish. The nice thing is that when we as a municipal agency issue an emergency alert on Nextdoor, it gets sent as a push notification, an email, and a text message to registered users. And we have upwards of 80% of our community as registered users on Nextdoor. So
Wow.
In an emergency, our ability to reach the community actually is quite effective on Nextdoor. But we, of course, are looking at best practices out in the industry for how can we continue to reach people in an emergency. In a declared emergency or in a major event, we have our partners at the county with Code Red, which allows us to issue a formal emergency alert, which gets sent to different cell phone numbers that are considered to be within the area that was impacted. And we have a variety of other tools that we lean on. But it's something we're continuing to work on because we know that urgency in an emergency, of course, is critical.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson.
How do you propose to, or how do we now measure engagement now? What, if any, changes do you foresee in measuring that as you go forward with some new tools and approaches?
I think that a lot of folks in marketing communications get very focused on metrics, and that would be, the quantitative element of an analysis. I look at the qualitative as being the most important. What's the impact that we're having? And that can be more difficult to measure. I will say that the Orlo platform has a great tool called social listening that, through their partnerships with the different social media platforms, allows them to show us what's happening out in the community. And in particular with Nextdoor, I think many folks in the community don't realize that as a municipal agency, we can only post on Nextdoor. We don't have visibility into the feed. So I don't know if a resident is posting something on Nextdoor, what that is. I won't see that. But by using these software platforms, we're able to now have a better understanding of the impact of our message. The way that I like to look at that is, if we have put something out there, if we have told a story, we've shared a post showing the great work that's happened from a project wrapping up, and someone on that team tells me that when they were at the community center, someone stopped them and told them that, those dotted lines are impactful. And I think that shows that we're increasing that awareness and that engagement.
The reason, or what lies behind my question is, in certain instances, for example, when we were working on the PROS plan, we had one hell of a lot of engagement. People were volunteering for the presentations we had and participating, and there are lots of things on Nextdoor and lots of communication. And when you see the comprehensive plan, which admittedly is a little bit duller fare, the amount of engagement measured by people saying, well, what about this, what about that, which they were doing in spades and parks, was quite a bit less. And we've had several instances with some of the duller but still important stuff, and so that's more a statement really than a question. And I don't know how you go about it, but as a city council member, it's seeing what people think about something is important to me, because there are all kinds of people that, you know, call and throw bombs and send me emails and all that kind of stuff, but also that tends to be people who have a certain point of view, and there's a lot of communication in one point of view, but it's harder for me to assess, well, you know, there are 22 emails here, but are there other people who are really interested in this subject who have a different view of it? And trying to learn that is a challenge I have, and I'm not sure you or anybody can solve that exactly, but that's one of the frustrations I have with our communications. And maybe I'm frustrated with the wrong thing.
No, I think I'll answer your statement with another statement. I work very closely with my colleagues across the East Side and nationally with the Public Relations Society of America. And specific to government, one of the challenges that we all see is there's a knowledge awareness gap. And what I mean by that is something such as the PROS plan or the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review has tremendous impact on the community. But the layperson, if you will, may see a post about the PROS plan or the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review and not automatically know what that means. But they certainly know what it means when they see a post about how the Seahawks are doing. And so it takes quite a big lift to help build not only understanding, but value for their time spent on that topic. And when we talk about competing for attention spans, it's very difficult, right, to do all of that in a way that someone can digest, realize that it's impactful for them, that they should engage with this, and then do that engagement when we have what we call scrolling culture, right? This is not isolated to us on Mercer Island. This is industry-wide. This is every government agency. But there are ways to do that that I think require more nuance, and that's part of what this plan is getting at, right? You don't want to just throw a post up on Facebook saying, the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review is currently underway. Here's how you can engage with it. Click this link to take a survey, right? Instead, you have to say, this project is happening, and this is what it means for the island. Are you interested in this? Please share your feedback because it will result in X, Y, Z. But doing that in a way that fits that narrow window you have for attention span. And what you were speaking to, Councilmember Jacobson, is folks who are particularly engaged in these areas or feel very strongly about these topics tend to be the ones that show up, because that knowledge awareness gap doesn't exist nearly to the extent that it does for them as it does the layperson. So I always caution our teams, when you look at online engagement, that is not a representative sample of our community sentiment as a whole. It is a representative sample of the people who we were able to reach through that knowledge awareness gap.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Quick AI question. Can we use AI to translate video content into other languages? Is that something that we might do?
Yes, the technology exists. Is it reliable and fitting for us at this stage? We're evaluating that. But that is where AI is a tremendous help, right? It takes what were traditionally lengthy amounts of staff time and automates those processes for us. And so we're looking at it in both making things more accessible, right? So translation, but also helping us in other ways that shrink staff load. So it's something we're looking at.
Sounds good. All right, not seeing any other questions, we're going to move on, and that's going to get us to the city manager report. And I'm going to welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening, City Council. Happy New Year. All right, it's Tuesday, January 7th. Welcome back after almost a month off. Casey, we'll go to the next slide, please. And the next one. We are back at it. We have of course, our council meeting tonight. We will see you again on the 21st. Boards and commissions are ramping back up as well. We have Parks and Recreation Commission meeting on Thursday. We're continuing work on the development of the park zone. And then next week, the Utility Board, Arts Council, and the Open Space Conservancy Trust are all meeting. As a reminder, we keep all of our meetings updated on our website. That also includes our agendas and our minutes. Next slide. Just a really short report for you tonight as we're all coming back from vacation. A quick update, council, on the booster pump station upgrades. You may recall this fall, we were dealing with some failing infrastructure at our booster pump station, which is highly problematic. That image on the screen there is what provides the juice to pressurize our water system and basically get water to all the reaches of the island. The good news is replacement of pumps 2 and 3 was completed in December. Replacement of pumps 4 and 5 is underway now, and then we'll be going back to pump number 1 in the coming months. This is part of a comprehensive booster pump station upgrade project, and I'll have another update for you in a couple months when the work is fully complete. Next slide, please. Also, a water-related project update. We are in the process of replacing the generator at the city's water reservoir. The current generator is aged out. So in the event of a power outage, if we've recently experienced, we rely on this generator to keep the reservoir operational. Currently, we're, just to keep it really simple, we're working on connecting the new generator. We're on a temporary generator as backup right now, and we hope to have everything up and running very soon this month. Next slide, please. Here at the community center, we closed down for, I think it was a total of 3 weeks to do some really important and much needed repair work. This building takes a lot of beating all year long. So we had to move all the furniture out of the main floor. That included the pool tables and all of the office equipment. It was quite a lift, and that set us up for the work we did over the holidays. If you get a chance to walk out in the lobby, you'll see we have new carpet. The gym courts floors were refinished. The dance room flooring was replaced. It's now got the same product that we have in the Mercer room. And we finally were able to do some wall painting and patching and painting, I guess, in that order. Thank you to the team members for working through the holidays to make sure this work got done. That was quite a lift behind the scenes. And certainly thank you to the community for your flexibility and understanding during that closure. Next slide, please. Just a handful of upcoming events. You just heard from Derek Franklin about a number of the services that YFS provides to our community. Wanted to alert you to a new senior support group that actually will begin meeting tomorrow here at the community center from 10:30 to 12. This is a free support group for spouses and partners of those with dementia. Our own Mercer Island resident, Karen Mack, who's a social worker and is retired, is the facilitator. You can simply stop by, or if you'd like more information, call the YFS confidential voicemail. Next slide, please. All right, some shout outs. Just looking back to December, we wanted to acknowledge some really fantastic events. On December 13th, we hosted a family movie night and holiday party here at the community center. These are programs that we're doing almost once a month now, and they're really drawing a considerable crowd. We had 250 people. I'm pretty sure that was a sold out attendance. We had snacks, arts and crafts, a movie, and Santa even dropped by. A couple of days later, December 15th, the Argosy Christmas ship came by, and again, a nice crowd of about 150 people at Luther Burbank for carols, hot cocoa, cookies, and lots of holiday spirit. Next slide, please. And at the end of December, we hosted a Hanukkah celebration at Mercerdale Park, and really also great turnout. We are so thankful to all of our partners who made all of the events possible. Our sponsors, Mercer Island City Lifestyle, Puget Sound Energy, John L. Scott, Mercer Island Martial Arts, and I know I'm missing a lot of other people that came and participated and performed all through December. We had just a really great holiday program. Thank you to the recreation team for hosting, certainly the maintenance crews for doing all the work behind the scenes, the setup and the takedown. Next slide, and I think that is it for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move next to public comment, and I'm going to seek to reclaim a little bit of time. Please state your name and city of residence, and we're going to have a timer on the screen, so get that up for you.
Greetings, I'm Tom Hildebrandt. I live at 6880 West Mercer Way. Though Many of you may know me as a member of the Open Space Conservancy Trust Board. I come here tonight speaking on my own behalf. Christmas is a very special day for me, not only because it is a time of celebration with family and friends. On that one blessed day, I can go outside and not hear the continuous drone of leaf blowers. On any other day, even Thanksgiving, I can expect to have my ears assaulted by those infernal machines. The city already recognizes that the opportunity to enjoy one's property in peace is an important right. Sometime in the past 5 years, the city revised its nuisance code so that the section on unregulated noise now prohibits production at any time of any of the following sounds or noises, which by reason of their intensity, frequency, duration, volume, pitch, or any other reason disturb the peace, quiet, repose, or comfort of any person. Subparagraphs 1 through 5 describe sounds of horns, motor vehicles, sound amplifiers, musical instruments, vehicles again. Subparagraph 6 reads, any other unreasonably loud, disturbing, continuous, irritating, or unnecessary noise, whether emanating from a human, animal, or mechanical source. I submit that the noise generated by leaf blowers is all of those things. In particular, the necessity of chasing the last leaf off of one's driveway in the midst of Mercer Island's thousands of trees is the height of hubris. Within seconds, another leaf will fall. What can be achieved with a broom and rake, as I do in my own yard, is as much cleanliness as one should expect. I therefore ask the City Council to do as Seattle, San Francisco, and many other large cities have done, and explicitly ban the use of gas-powered leaf blowers on Mercer Island. This is a bit of a first world problem, but one that I deal with on a daily basis since I now work full-time from home. Thank you very much for your attention and time this evening.
Okay, thanks for hanging with us for those study sessions. Our next item of business is the consent agenda, which contains AB 6592, November 27, 2024 payroll certification, AB 6593, December 13, 2024 payroll certification, AB 6594, December 27, 2024 payroll certification, certification of claims for November 27 and December 6, 13, 20, and 27, 2024, City Council regular hybrid meeting minutes of December 3, 2024, AB 6582, Lincoln Landing Shoreline and Stormwater Enhancement Closeout Project, AB 6598, 2024 Water System Improvements Construction Bid Award, AB 6607, Ratification of Proclamation Number 352, Ending Local Emergency, and AB 6609, 2025 City Manager Employment Agreement. Council may have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Weinberg, seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Andral. Aye. Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
And Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Our first item of regular business is AB 6596, the 2025 Planning Session Agenda, and we welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening again, City Council. We worked with the mayor and deputy mayor to provide you with a draft agenda for the planning session, which is coming up in February. Our focus at this planning session is really your first touch at what I will call the early design and early design concepts for the public safety and maintenance building. I anticipate a good 2-hour discussion on that. We'll also have Jason Kittner and his team from Public Works providing you an update on the water transmission line project. So that is how we intend to focus our time, and then certainly Community Member of the Year. I'll remind you that we've structured that day so that your planning session will start around noon. We may adjust that if we don't need all that time. And then at 5 o'clock, we will go into our regular meeting. We canceled the second council meeting in February because it conflicts with midwinter break. So that February date will be very busy for us, but also very important as we kick off planning for 2 major capital projects we're working on over the next couple of years. At this point, we're looking for approval of the agenda so that we can begin preparing the materials.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, is there a motion to approve the 2025 City Council Planning Session agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum, seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. Any discussion? Councilmember Jacobson.
My only discussion would be to the extent earlier that the materials that will be asked to dig into and understand are distributed, the better. Because I suspect that at least on item number 1, there are going to be plans and maybe specifications and, renderings and those kinds of things, and develop intelligent questions. It'll be helpful to have those as soon as possible.
Sure, it will be, I can't commit to a date, but I'll be meeting tomorrow with the team, and we'll talk about how soon we can get those materials out to Councilmember Jacobson.
Thank you.
All right.
I just want to thank you guys for coming up for a clean, important agenda and really focusing on those 2 critical projects. So thank you.
All right. With that, City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Mayor Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Andral. Aye. Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum,
Aye.
and Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Our next item of regular business is AB 6556, Middle Housing and Accessory Dwelling Unit, HB 1110, HB 1337, and SB 5258 compliance. We welcome CPD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Again, for the record, Jeff Thomas with CPD. I'd like to introduce Deputy Director Allison Van Gorp, who is going to be doing the lion's share of the presentation here this evening for the Council. We also have Adam Zach, one of our planners here this evening to provide support if necessary. While Allison is queuing up the slide deck, I would like to make just a few brief comments. This session here this evening is the first in what we anticipate will be a short series of discussions and action items related to House Bills 1110, 1337, and Senate Bill 5258, all related in the general subject area of middle housing. This is the latest project or effort here by the city to comply in a timely fashion with what's become a number of state mandates related to land use planning and housing in Washington. Tonight's session is information only. We're happy to try and answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. When we come back on January 21st, 2 weeks from now, we will be seeking some city council direction at that time. The agenda bill, all 14 pages of it, if you had a chance to go through the entire thing prior to tonight's meeting, you will note that there is a preview of the direction that we'll be looking to get from the city council in a couple weeks, so you can start thinking about that. And I think that pretty much wraps up my introductory comments. The last thing I will mention real quick, we are focused on having interim regulations adopted in response to these bills. And that is a pattern that has we've utilized here in 2024 into 2025. So interim regulations, as a friendly reminder, come straight to the city council for consideration and adoption. And then when we cycle back at some point in the future for permanent regulations, that's when those go to the Planning Commission for a public hearing and a Planning Commission recommendation to the City Council. So everything we do on an interim basis does not have Planning Commission participation initially, but certainly does on the back end. And with that, Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I think you've got the slide deck ready to go.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got about 24 slides that I'm going to run through pretty quickly, and then we'll have time for some questions and discussion. Let me just start this up. Okay, so just a quick overview here. I'm going to cover some key concepts and definitions. I'll talk about our approach and scope of work briefly, and then I'll do an overview of each of the pieces of legislation and their requirements for Mercer Island. And then to wrap up, I'll just give you an overview of the next steps with the future meetings we have planned on this topic. So key concepts, just want to get a few of the definitions out here. So the first is middle housing. And this is a term that's kind of arisen in the last 5 to 10 years in the planning world. And it's really looking at the types of residential development that are happening in many cities in our region. So currently, especially in Mercer Island, in addition to other cities, we've got a large amount of single family homes. And then we have a couple of commercial centers, the town center and the South End Shopping Center, for example, that have more intense development. In the town center, we have a lot of mid-rise housing, apartment buildings, 5 to 6 story buildings. And what we don't have very much of is all the types of housing that are in the middle. Anything from a duplex to a fourplex to townhouses to other smaller types of apartment buildings. You do see these types of housing in older neighborhoods throughout the region. It was more common to permit these types of building intermingled with single family homes about 100 years ago, but in more recent approaches to zoning, that hasn't been the case. And so in newer neighborhoods, we see single family housing more on its own. And what the legislature has done in the last couple of years is focused on looking for ways to encourage and incentivize types of development that are less expensive. And so what we've seen with this middle housing legislation is a focus on encouraging these other types of middle housing in cities. Another piece of legislation focuses on accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and these are smaller dwelling units that can either be attached to the primary unit or detached. They're often referred to as mother-in-law units or backyard cottages or things like that. We've permitted them in Mercer Island for many years at this point. There's a couple hundred of them out there, and we currently are permitting about 9 or 10 ADUs per year. Another term is unit density, and this is kind of a new way of looking at density that's being offered through HB 1110. Typically, when you think of the word density or residential density, it's in terms of the number of houses per acre. But with unit density, it uses a different framework. It looks at the number of houses per lot. And so since lot sizes can vary, this is a little bit more of a squishy term. It doesn't give you like an apples to apples comparison, but you're simply looking at how many homes could be developed on an existing lot. And the final term I want to cover is unit lot subdivision. And this is the idea that you could divide an existing, what we call parent lot, into up to 4 child lots or unit lots. And so these smaller unit lots can then provide a way for middle housing or ADUs to be configured with fee simple land ownership. You often see this around the region with townhouse development. It allows the owner of the townhouse to own the land that it's built on in a fee simple arrangement rather than a condominium arrangement. And this is now going to be required statewide for areas that have residential housing. All right, a little bit about our approach and scope of work. So looking at these 3 pieces of legislation, we're really just looking at this time to meet minimum compliance with the state mandates. We're also looking to implement our comprehensive plan that the council just adopted last month in 2024. There's a number of policies in the housing element that relate to middle housing and ADUs, and so adopting these regulations will help us implement those goals and policies. In terms of approach, we're looking to address all 3 of these pieces of legislation through a single code amendment. And we're taking kind of a phased approach, like Jeff mentioned at the beginning. We want to adopt interim development regulations in the near term to meet the June 30th deadline that's coming up here quickly this year, and then come back and look at permanent regulations in the future that could involve a more lengthy process with additional community engagement and the full legislative review with the Planning Commission. And that longer phase 2 approach can also align with other updates that we're needing to do to residential development regulations. All right, just a bit more on the 2 phases and the scope of work. So like I said, in this first phase with interim development regulations, we're really just seeking to meet the minimum requirements of the legislation. We'll need to add middle housing type definitions and permitted uses. We'll need to add unit density definitions and permit 2 to 4 middle housing units per lot. We need to add middle housing an affordability incentive. We'll need to amend our ADU standards, add some new parking requirements for middle housing and ADUs, and add the unit lot subdivision provisions. There's also some optional policy choices that the City Council will need to discuss, and we're planning to have that discussion in 2 weeks on January 21st. So we'll have a little more information on that coming. And then for this future phase 2, really the goal of that will be to develop tailored regulations that can better address the needs of Mercer Island. And during that process, like I said previously, we'll be able to do more community engagement and outreach and, hear from the community about what types of development they're wanting to see, what kind of concerns they have around these forms of development. And we can consider more specific and tailored regulations that look at things like building heights and setbacks and floor area, design standards. We can look at tailoring the regulations to the specific housing types that we choose to permit. We could look at development incentives, impact fee updates, tree standards, and a number of other issues related to the streetscape and development sites. All right, so now I'm going to dive into an overview of the requirements of each piece of legislation. So the first is HB 1110, and this has been known as the middle housing legislation. It was passed in 2023, and it comes with a compliance deadline of June 30th, 2025. And in addition, this is a little different from the other 2 pieces of legislation. The state adopted a model ordinance that will go into effect if the city does not adopt compliant regulations by that June 30th deadline. And so we're looking to avoid that because I think there's some specific things that we would like to tailor to Mercer Island's needs by adopting our own regulations. And some of the basic provisions, I'll go into this in a little more detail in the next couple slides, but right off the bat, the legislation requires us to allow 6 of the 9 middle housing types that are identified in the legislation. We need to permit unit densities of 2 to 4 units per lot. This is kind of a fundamental thing. Development standards for middle housing cannot be more restrictive than for single family development. And so that means we can't have a different or stricter standard for middle housing. It needs to have the same kinds of dimensional standards and other review requirements that we're applying to single family. Any design review requirements must be administrative, and there's some limits on parking requirements that I'll go through in another slide. Okay, so circling back to the housing types, the legislation identifies 9 types of housing. While these are all listed as distinct housing types, there is quite a bit of overlap. As you can probably see from these pictures, there's a lot of similarities between the different types. One key difference is many of these are attached forms of housing where the units are attached together or stacked on top of each other. And then cottage housing is a detached form of housing where you have small individual units that are not attached to each other. Some of these have open space requirements, like cottage housing and courtyard apartments would have a centralized open space that's surrounded by the homes. So we'll get more into these options when we meet in 2 weeks and make some decisions about which are the 6 types that Mercer Island should be permitting. All right, going a little further into this, these requirements will apply in all zones that allow residential development unless higher densities are already allowed. So in Mercer Island, that is the R8.4, R9.6, R12, and R15 zones. So in this map on the screen, it's everything except for the gray areas, which are other higher density zones or non-residential zones, and the parks, which are bright green. I'm going to pause because I see a hand up and
Sure,
we could-
Councilmember Anderl.
Yeah, thanks. I just didn't want to lose track of it. There were apparently 9 housing types, but on the slide I only saw 8.
Yeah, so I had combined the 5-plex and 6-plex into one image just for space on the slide. And
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions while we're paused? No? Carry on.
Okay, so picking back up on the second half of this slide, I've mentioned the term unit density a couple of times, and this is the requirement that we must allow at least 2 middle housing units on every lot, every residential lot. So all of these R zones shown on the map would need to permit 2 units of middle housing. In addition, for the area that's within a 1/4 mile walking distance from the light rail station, 4 units will be allowed on those lots. And I'll have a map that shows that area in just a minute. Finally, if any project includes a affordable unit, they can also have up to 4 units total. And an affordable unit is defined as something that's affordable to a family earning 60% AMI for rental housing and 80% AMI for home ownership. All right, so this map shows that walking distance area around the light rail station. The 1/4 mile walking distance is shown in dark pink. And part of the area on the south side of I-90 is grayed out. And that's because that is town center and multifamily zoning. And so the middle housing requirements don't apply there because they have higher density zoning already. So really the area that's affected by that 1/4 mile area where 4 units per lot are allowed outright is this sort of odd crescent-shaped area to the north and east of the park and ride. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the parking requirement limitations in this bill. And these will apply for ADUs under HB 1337 as well. They have the exact same parking requirements. So no off-street parking can be required within a 1/2 mile walking distance of the light rail station. And so that area is this lighter pink outer donut, and then including the darker pink inner donut as well. So within this area, we cannot require off-street parking for middle housing or ADUs. And we've done GIS analysis, and that applies to about 325 lots. Secondly, we may only require 1 parking space per unit for lots that are smaller than 6,000 square feet. And so we don't have very many small lots under 6,000 square feet in Mercer Island. There's only about 150 of those where this lower limit would apply. And then everywhere else, we can require 2 parking spaces per unit. So if you had 2 middle housing units on a lot, we could require 4 total parking spaces, for example. And that's going to apply to about 98% of these residential lots in Mercer Island. I also wanted to talk a little bit about critical areas. HB 1110 has a provision that says middle housing is not required on portions of lots with critical areas. However, critical areas regulation is pretty complicated, and the State Department of Commerce has provided in their guidance document some additional information on this, and they've specified that the way this should be interpreted is that middle housing is not required on portions of lots where the critical areas would preclude development. And so that has to do with the type of critical area and the extent of the critical area in the lot. So certain types of critical areas are more restrictive, like wetlands and watercourses, for example, have pretty strict prohibitions on development within the critical area, and then they have buffers and setbacks that also are very restrictive about what could be built there. Whereas geologically hazardous critical areas like steep slopes or erosion hazard areas, seismic areas, there's a little bit more flexibility there where geotechnical engineering and structural engineering can be used to where development can be permitted if the engineering can keep the site and the structure safe. So this is very complicated. The way we're anticipating this is likely to work is we'll need to apply our existing critical areas regulations on a site-by-site basis. So if a middle housing project is proposed, a critical area study would need to be conducted to look at the site conditions and determine if development is feasible or not, and what engineering could be required if it's a geologically hazardous area. There's a big section in the agenda bill that talks about a couple of the different options for how the middle housing regulations are applied and an ability to exempt out up to 25% of lots. We're planning to have a bigger discussion about that topic in 2 weeks on January 21st, but I just wanted to bookmark that here, that there's more to talk about with critical areas, and it's fairly complicated. Okay, I'm going to move on to HB 1337 now. This is the Accessory Dwelling Units Bill, also passed in 2023, and it also has a deadline of June 30th, 2025. It requires us to allow 2 ADUs on all lots that allow single-family development. Those 2 ADUs can be attached or detached or a combination, or they can be a conversion of an existing structure like a garage. Each ADU, we must allow at least 1,000 square feet of floor area per ADU. We cannot require owner occupancy of those units, and we must allow sale of the unit individually. The parking restrictions, like I said, are the same as they were for HB 1110. So that same half-mile area and the 6,000 square foot lot size. We cannot require public street improvements as a permit condition for ADUs, and any impact fees charged on ADUs are limited to 50% of the rate charged to a single-family home. Okay, moving along to SB 5258. This is a bill that was also passed in 2023. It didn't get quite as much play in the media, and it kind of went under the radar for a little while. It mostly is about a different topic, but it includes a small section about unit lot subdivision. And as I mentioned up at the top of the presentation, unit lot subdivision is the process to create the small unit lots from a parent lot to allow middle housing to be owned separately. It's fee simple land ownership. And together with another provision in the RCWs, 3670A 635, which requires zero lot line development, we will need to adopt standards for unit lot subdivision that allow either attached or detached units that can be sold separately. Okay, so kind of to sum up, I wanted to talk about where we're going next here with the next few meetings. Like I've mentioned a few times now, we're meeting again in 2 weeks on January 21st for a second briefing. The agenda bill for tonight's meeting included several of the topics that are policy options and questions for consideration that we'd like to get direction from the council on at that time. And, you know, if there's issues that you'd like to see additional information on, if you've got questions tonight, we can look to provide additional information in that agenda bill for the 21st. And then we currently have scheduled a public hearing and first reading of a draft ordinance with interim regulations for February 4th and a second reading on March 4th. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. Happy to take questions and hear your comments and discussion.
Excellent. All right, we'll stop screen share and I will open it up to questions from the council. I can kick it off. There we go. Councilmember Reynolds.
Sure, great presentation. I was hesitant at first, but I think Ms. Van Gorp, Ms. Thomas, you have a good idea of doing the minimum plan for the next 6 months. It sounds like we're going to take a broader view when it goes to the Planning Commission in the latter half of the year. And I don't know who this is a question for, but it's a question for somebody, maybe the mayor, maybe staff. What opportunity do you envision for the council to have to give direction to the Planning Commission on how much beyond the minimum they should be willing to go and in what areas?
I can actually take a first crack at responding to that, council member. First, just to clarify, we will, assuming that these interim regulations are adopted here, you know, in the next 30 to 60 days, I don't anticipate this year we'll be going to the Planning Commission with permanent regulations on this subject. It would be no earlier than 2026. The reason for that, just briefly, is we've still got a couple other pieces of state legislation from either last year, I believe it might be all from last year actually, that we still need to respond to in a timely fashion. And we also have other items on our work program for this year, docketed items, for example, and we will need to evaluate what comes out of the current state legislative session that will require some sort of short-term or immediate response. So just wanted to make a note of that for the council. In terms of then to answer the second part of your question, I would anticipate that for all of these sets of interim regulations that we've been working on over the past 12 months or so, when we're ready to come forward, especially for the more complex ones, I would anticipate coming forward to the council for a work session to receive any direction from the council that they would like the staff to carry to the Planning Commission as part of a permanent rulemaking process. And it will also give the staff an opportunity to present to City Council how these interim regulations have worked one way or the other. If we do end up having, whether it's what we're discussing here tonight or any other, you know, set of interim regulations that have already been passed or will be passed here in the near future, we've got these interim regulations, we're trying them out a little bit, and if there is some activity on them, we'll be able to report that to the council and to let you see what's happened. So good, bad, or indifferent.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, council, anyone else? Councilmember Weiberg.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the great presentation, summary of what the changes are that are coming our way. I asked a raft of questions in the document that you shared out to the council and got your responses to those. So thank you again to you and your staff for answering those as well. I had a couple of follow-up questions. The 9 forms of middle housing, the definitions for them, as you mentioned, overlap quite a bit, or as Allison mentioned, overlap quite a bit. I'm trying to identify the key difference between a triplex and a lot that has 1 primary unit and 2 attached dwelling units. Is the primary difference that in the latter case, there has to be 1 designated as primary, whereas in a triplex, there is no primary?
Yeah, and Currently, ADUs are limited to 900 square feet. We'll need to increase that to at least 1,000 square feet, but as it stands right now, ADUs are the only type of unit that has that size cap. And so triplex units could potentially be larger.
Okay, okay. And okay, one other follow-up question.
Carry
Okay. Also on the 5258, we're looking at the lot splitting. Is there anything in the law that prevents us from requiring vehicular access to both lots? Or can one of the lots be away from the street without a chance to get a driveway back there?
The state law does not address that, I believe. That would need to be covered by our local regulations.
Okay, but it doesn't disallow us from requiring that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I had a quick question about the GMA FAQ that we post to our website every year. This is the document that gives us the ledger of the prior year's permit activity. When is that going to get updated to show 2024 permit issuance? And can somebody report on the ADU production, how many of the ADUs produced each year were a component of a net new single-family home, or if they were standalone? Because it's not possible to tell from that data if they're coming kind of conjoined with the single-family home or if they're just standalone net new ADUs.
So two-part answer. The answer to the first part of your question, soon. That's something that we do try and do at the top of the year or very close to it. So we'll get those numbers updated for 2024 and get them on the city's website. The second part of your question, let me work with our permit center staff. I think that to answer that question, the second part of your question would require a quick manual reconciliation, but that's something that can be done.
Okay, and I really am only interested in going back to when RDS was implemented, so 2017, 18 is plenty far enough?
7 years, yep. That's fine, yeah,
Okay.
we can do that.
Another question I have, I'll just keep going until I see somebody stop. Around the lot subdivisions, if we have a residential zone and the minimum zoning is, 8.4, 13, whatever it might be, the simple lot subdivisions are allowed to create, what was the name that you used for them? Simple parcels?
The unit lots.
Unit lots that exist together as an assemblage on an R-zoned lot that is compliant with the zoning, is that right?
That's
So
right.
we're not splitting lots, we're not splitting properties, we're creating parcels within a property assemblage. Is that the right language?
I mean, they can be separately owned, but they're
Tax
kind of
parcels.
a sublot. They're treated a bit differently in terms of how setbacks are applied, and you cannot further divide them.
Okay, but if we looked at an R zone and it was 8.4 and you had a 9,000 square foot lot, and they created these small, simple lots, this would still be a single piece of property, but it could be multiple tax parcels.
I think that's right.
Okay, I see Councilmember Anderell shaking her head no.
That you do.
So the reason I'm asking is if we think about the way our code works, we talk about parcels. I'm not sure that we talk about properties. And if we were to, for example, have a limit of how many rental properties could be on a property or a parcel, I don't know what the right language might be. But if 1337 precludes owner occupancy of any of the units, could you have an ordinance that said for a legal lot, you can have no more than in a residential zone, you can have no more than a single rental property? Is that barred from any of this new legislation?
I'm going to want to go back and consider your question a little bit more. We can come back to the council with some additional information. These small lots, the intent, as I understand it, is to supersede any density requirements the city may have. So to Councilmember Andrel's head shake there a moment ago, I believe I agree with her that these would be legal lots that are being created, but they're superseding our current code requirements to enable these smaller middle housing forms to, to come in on a, what's the word I'm looking for, Allison? It's eluding me at the moment, but
Yeah,
it'd be a parcel that would be able to be legally owned in
yeah. They're
distinct
legally
separate
separate
units.
entity, but we need to track that they're a child lot or a unit lot and not a full-fledged lot because it can't be further divided.
So Mayor, that's something we need to look at a little bit more closely, but we'll do that and follow up.
That'd be great.
Mhm.
Councilmember Reynolds.
I had a question about the ADUs, and I think I heard you say that we can't prohibit them from being sold individually. How does that work in practice if the ADU is on the same lot as the house? Does that create a lot subdivision, or do you own the ADU but not the land that it sits on?
Well, there's a couple different ways to do that. You can use this unit lot subdivision that we were just talking about to make the ADU have its own child lot or unit lot that could be sold separately. Or you can use state condominium law to condominiumize the property, and that way the main primary home could continue to own the land and the ADU building could be sold separately as a condominium.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Weicker.
So looking at figure 1, the example of the multi-subunits you're creating out of the parent lot, it looks like the new units have to adhere to the lot setbacks, but Allison, you had mentioned something about 0 lot lines. Does that mean the old parent lot setbacks wouldn't apply any longer? Like, I know this is getting in the weeds, but I'm just planning ahead to the 21st and thinking about what's going to get built.
Parent lot setbacks apply to the parent lot, but then there will be different standards for the unit lot. And one of the state laws is that we must allow 0 lot subdivision, and these attached units like townhouses or side-by-side duplexes or triplexes. So that limits what we can do in terms of setbacks on the unit lots.
So for example, diagram 4 shows the units going right up to the lot line.
Correct.
So that'll be fascinating to see what gets done between what we pass in June and what the Planning Commission will get to in 2026.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. On the impact fee question, can you just to clarify here, so it says ADUs impact fees up to 50% of the rate that would be applied. If you had a new project, totally new construction, and you had primary residence and an ADU, would the entire impact fee have to be spread out between the 2 projects on the 1 lot, or would it be 100% of a standard build and then up to 50% of that standard bill on the ADU?
Yeah, I mean, we currently do not charge impact fees on ADUs, so under our current regulations, we would only charge the fee for the single-family home. If we want to, the council can choose to enact this up to 50% impact fee for the ADU, and then with what the scenario you just described, the single-family home would pay the full single-family rate, and then the ADU, in addition, would need to pay that up to 50% rate.
Okay, great. Can you send me the schedule that we put together back in, I think it was 21, 22? I just don't remember off the top of my head what those numbers were.
Can I ask how is CPD going to update their permit fees to include middle housing? Do you already have kind of a fee schedule of what you suspect permit review and inspections would look like?
Building permit fees are based on the valuation of the construction, so that system can be applied to middle housing as is, and it will work fine. Land use permits are set up differently, but I think by and large those should also work as they are. Any kind of subdivision or critical area review or other land use approval would need to use one of those permit fees.
Got it. Okay, anything else, council? Boy, you wore us out. All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. We'll see you back for the rest of the year, every council meeting, right?
Probably so.
All right.
Thank you.
We now move to other business in the planning schedule, and welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening again, City Council. Let's see, looking ahead, we will be following up at the next council meeting on this topic, and we're going to stick with it meeting after meeting until we get the interim regulations adopted. So I've just behind the scenes, we were taking notes on all the questions you asked. We already talked about the February 4th planning session. Right now, we're scheduled to begin at noon. I think we'll look through the next couple of weeks. We'll be working through our materials for that planning session. We may adjust the start time to 1 o'clock if we have extra time. And I think that is all I have for you this evening. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, council, any,
Had a
Councilmember
question.
Weinberg. Yeah.
Do we have deadlines for HB 1293 and 1042 and 1998? And does that affect the planning schedule, or were those given with more flexibility?
I don't have that information. Can you send me an email and we'd be happy to follow up?
Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember absences, any upcoming absences? Councilmember Weinberg.
Possible absence on the 21st. Don't know currently.
Of January?
Yes.
Okay. All right, councilmember reports. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum, anything to report?
Yeah, we have a PIC meeting tomorrow night, so I'll report back on that. I also just want to take a second here to thank Chief Sutter. I had a chance to talk with him the other day about what his team was working on as it came to the graffiti that was posted on Allender Middle School the other day. Appreciate the efforts to investigate that and see, what you can find out there. Obviously, the minimum, it's vandalism, and at its worst, it's horrible. It's intimidation. It's racism. It's awful. I understand there was additional swastikas found today at the school as well. It's just heartbreaking that this would happen in our community. So I thank the city for their response there, and I think as a community we have to have these conversations about this is just not appropriate. It's not welcoming as a society, and it's just not something that we can have in what is a pretty close-knit community.
Okay, thanks for those comments. I have nothing to report. Councilor Weicker.
Nothing.
Weinberg?
Yeah, so the next monthly open brunch will be at 10 a.m. on Sunday, January 19th at L'Expérience Paris restaurant. That's at 3020 78th Avenue Southeast here on Mercer Island. As always, all are welcome. It's an open agenda, news, sports, weather, humor, even questions about city business. All I ask is that everybody shows their respects to the chef by ordering some food and or beverage, and that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Nothing to report.
Okay, Councilmember Anderall.
Nothing.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Nothing.
All right, the next hybrid meeting of the City Council is scheduled for Tuesday, January 21 at 5 p.m. Time is now 7:12 p.m. The City Council will go into executive session for approximately 1 hour. 1, to consider a selection of a site or acquisition of real estate for lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101B. And 2, to discuss with legal counsel pending or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. As a reminder to council, please stay seated. The city staff has terminated the broadcast. Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us tonight.